As a result of the settlement, Lowe's will now pay thousands of dollars in back pay to workers it illegally fired and will send a notice to its employees reminding them that it is their right to form a union.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Let's jump right into last week in Southern labor. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from July 11th to the 18th. In new union campaigns, 50 workers at People's Transit in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU Local 732. 3 workers at Amentum in Corpus Christi, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 100 workers at a national limousine in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with ATU Local 732. 65 workers at Arkema in Axis, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. 8 workers at Loomis in Charleston, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Federation of LEOs, PBA Armored Car Division. 18 workers at Univar Solutions in Garland, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 564. 21 workers at Fleming Mason Energy Cooperative in Flemingsburg, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 2100. 7 workers at Velocity Electric and Automation in Grain Valley, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the IBEW, Local 124. 32 workers at Six Flags Entertainment in Kansas City, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, Local 31. In election results, 2 groups of workers withdrew their petition for a union election last week, those being 5 workers at Atos in Merritt Island, Florida, who had been seeking to unionize with IBEW Local 2088, and 37 workers at Tulane in New Orleans, Louisiana, who had been seeking to unionize with Workers United. Workers who had previously filed a petition to decertify the Utility Workers Union of America, UWUA, Local 335, as the union representing 27 workers at American Water MSG in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, withdrew their decertification petition. Starbucks workers at 2 locations voted to unionize with Starbucks Workers United last week, both in Austin, Texas, with one group voting 10-0 and the other 6-3. 1,100 workers at 14 U.S. Geological Survey USGS locations across the country voted to unionize with the National Federation of Federal Employees, NFI, IAM. The union reports that some units had a 99% yes vote, and more elections are scheduled at other USGS locations. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, drivers with the Z-Trip IRIS microtransit program in Kansas City filed a federal class action lawsuit demanding thousands in overtime back pay that drivers had a right to receive, but the company never paid. Low-wage workers with Stand Up KC and members representing faith, labor, and civil rights organizations stood in solidarity with the drivers during a press conference announcing the lawsuit. The NLRB reached a settlement agreement with Lowe's in New Orleans after finding merit in the unfair labor practice charges filed by the union that workers there attempted to organize with. As a result of the settlement, Lowe's will now pay thousands of dollars in back pay to workers it illegally fired and will send a notice to its employees reminding them that it is their right to form a union. Ultimately, workers there did not win their union last year, but their campaign did lead to the company raising wages for workers nationwide.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
In strikes and bargaining updates, the Communication Workers of America, CWA, were joined by Unite Here Local 23, the UAW, the Charlotte Metro Central Labor Council, the AFL-CIO, and other local coalitions to rally outside 2 Wells Fargo Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, to publicly condemn Wells Fargo for their illegal union-busting tactics and to demand that the company agreed to a fair contract with Wells Fargo Workers United, CWA. Recently, Wells Fargo Labor Relations Executive Stan Sherrill has been visiting unionized branches to interrogate union members and to spread misinformation, calling union signage, quote, propaganda, and illegally encouraging workers to file for a decertification petition. CWA has filed an unfair labor practice charge with the National Labor Relations Board. 200 drivers at Genesis Logistics, a DHL supply chain subsidiary, held a practice picket last week to demand a fair and timely first Teamsters contract. Earlier this year, the group voted by an over 90% margin to join the Teamsters. Since then, the company has stalled negotiations and refused to engage seriously. Last week, the drivers voted to authorize a strike in response to management's delays and illegal anti-union behavior. UFCW members and officers went on Seth Harris's Power at Work podcast last week to discuss how their union was able to get the first new pension in the meatpacking sector in nearly 50 years. They went into a little bit more detail than the officer did on our program, so it's worth a listen even if you've heard our coverage of it. ATU Local 1546 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana is refusing to sign off on the local transit authority's safety plan, which is required for the region to get federal transit dollars. The union president says that administrators have allowed a systemic failure of safety. In political and legislative updates, Labor Lab released a new report detailing how union compliance with reporting requirements continues to increase even as employers and union busters continue to be negligent in their reporting responsibilities. The IAM is renewing its calls for increased protections for airline workers in the wake of a guilty plea from somebody who assaulted one of their members, punching them into a state of unconsciousness while at work. Specifically, the union is calling for mandatory federal penalties for assaults on all aviation workers, increased staffing and security in high-risk airport areas, expanded training for de-escalation and reporting, and zero-tolerance policies that are jointly enforced by airlines and federal agencies. There are some great new analysis pieces up on Confined Space, a newsletter about workplace safety and labor issues. Stephen Knight analyzed a recent study that concluded that immigration enforcement undermines worker safety. Even some Republicans are starting to get nervous about Trump's education funding freeze, including Alabama's Senator Britt. Trump appears to be preparing to try to steamroll the Tennessee Valley Authority, the utility company for Tennessee, much of Mississippi, and part of Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky, and prepare it for privatization. Communities and environmental organizations are already fighting back, as are unions that represent TVA workers. The Trump administration has fired 17 immigration judges across the country without cause, according to the International Federation of Professional and Technical Employees, IFPTE, the union that represents the judges. The AFL-CIO has secured a majority in the House for the Protecting America's Workforce Act, which would rescind Trump's illegal executive order rescinding union rights for most federal workers. Now they are calling on Congress members who co-sponsored the legislation to sign what's called a discharge petition to bring the legislation to the floor for a vote. In internal union affairs, the AFL-CIO kicked off their bus tour across the country last week, calling for economic justice. The IAM joined in Charlotte, North Carolina, and highlighted their union's fight at the airport there. The AFL-CIO stopped in Nashville, too, with workers there highlighting the negative impacts of federal funding cuts. Unions are supporting their members who were affected by the Texas floods, with the IAM opening an assistance portal and the Texas AFL-CIO releasing a comprehensive list of resources and more. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll try to include it on next week's Roundup. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.